Now, business leaders from the New Zealand International Business Forum have welcomed the signing of the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership Trade Agreement. This is to go with your side of CPTPP. The chair of RCEP said that they are pleased it has come to fruition after 7 years of effort. If you listen to my introduction, you will see what I was talking about. The RCEP will further strengthen New Zealand's trade and economic relationships in the Asia-Pacific region and assist our economic recovery from COVID-19, as well as provide a 20-year boost to New Zealand's economy. Sounds good. Joined now by Stephen Jacobi, always my favourite, well, I shouldn't say favourite, because Mr. Finney might get upset. One of my many favourite trade commentators.
You can say favourite, Sarah, that's quite all right with me.
Hey,
most favoured nation, most favoured guest.
Yes, just keep going. When I saw this come through, this press release late last night, I thought, this is fantastic, but don't we already have an agreement of this nature? Could you explain what this means?
Yes, that's right, Sarah. We do have FTAs already with all the members of RCEP. So what do we get out of this new agreement? Well, we get the commitments that we've made with all of those people wrapped up into one super agreement, which makes it a little easier for our exporters who are dealing with what we sometimes call the noodle bowl of conflicting trade agreements around the Asia-Pacific region. We also get the chance to sit at the table when the rules of this agreement are being worked out and expanded in the future. And given that this is such a whopper, and given that it includes a large number of our major trading partners, 7 out of 10, we just have to be at that table when these discussions are being held. Now, the agreement has also made some small increases in our market access, particularly in Indonesia, for a range of primary products. But that's not the real thing. The real thing is that we are linked to this big new deal going forward in the region of most importance to us.
And the one player that's not at the table is India, because potentially their 1 million dairy farmers will be threatened by ours?
Yes, look, unfortunately, India is not in the final deal. There's a door open for them to join whenever they would like. They were part of this negotiation right up until the end. They were concerned about New Zealand and Australian agricultural exports to India. But then they got even more concerned about the fact and having to let in more Chinese goods. They found that too complicated to accept. It's a real shame India is not there. It would have made this an even better day for New Zealand trade. And it would have made sure that India was also at the table when these rules are being made. So we just have to find some other way to build that relationship.
There's been a lot of commentary on throughout media today here in New Zealand, with particularly a figure being bandied around of $2 billion. Please explain that. And new Minister of Trade, Damien O'Connor, is really heading this now. Have they really done the numbers and understand what this means?
By the way, Damien O'Connor has actually negotiated this deal for New Zealand over the last few years in his capacity as Minister of State for Trade. Right. He's actually done a very good job, has been very dogged, done his best to get India across the line. But this number, this figure, it's possibly a little misleading to fixate on it, frankly. I know the government always likes to come up with a figure to say how much this is going to be worth to us. But this is a figure that is derived from an econometric assessment of the whole agreement and its potential value to New Zealand over a very long period. And what they are looking at is, yes, the market access improvements, yes, the improvements to trade rules, but also the improvements in economic growth that are going to take place in the markets that are involved in RCEP. Bear in mind, this is going to deliver a free trade agreement between China, Japan, and Korea, and New Zealand will benefit from that as those markets continue to open up and grow as a result of this agreement. So this figure's been put together by a panel of experts, expert economists. It's all on the MFAT website. It doesn't mean that we're going to get $2 billion more of exports next year, unfortunately, if only life were that simple.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, the way our terms of trade are going and how fantastic our primary sector is, I wouldn't be surprised, Stephen.
Well, that's a good point, I think, and it's worth making, that the primary sector is holding this country up, and all credit to our farmers and other primary producers, horticulturalists, the fishers, the whole lot. This is what we have always known, that this is where the value and the strength of our economy come from.
What are some of these non-tariff barriers that, in particular, around fresh produce and what we saw over COVID, and how will that be improved?
Yes, it's really about things like rules being put in place to take advantage of COVID, to protect against COVID, or to do all sorts of things. Sometimes these are done quite innocently to meet some sort of particular concern. Sometimes they're done not quite so innocently to block trade. And what RCEP does is it puts in place a new process for dealing with these non-tariff barriers and an expedited dispute settlement system for dealing with them. What exporters tell us is that these non-tariff barriers can be worse than the tariffs. They add time, they cost money, and so fixing them is a major focus. And an example, of course, is coming up, and I'm sure you're going to ask about this. This latest example of potentially COVID being associated with some exports of New Zealand meat. It seems very unclear about what this is exactly. But let's just say, and without wanting to suggest this is going to happen, the Chinese were, for some reason, going to put in place some new rules about that. Actually, we know the Chinese have been putting in place new rules around COVID preparedness. If they are deemed to be unnecessary or overly distorting of trade, then we can use processes like this to address them. And often it's, in the immortal words of L.B. Martin, it's the putting right that counts. Sometimes economies do things. We've got to have a way to try to address them.
The putting right worries me in the faith of the WTO, though, Stephen.
Well, yes. The WTO is our ultimate
court of the land.
Yes, it's court. Yeah, that's right. Ultimate court. And that's been complicated by the United States positions around the WTO, by the assault on the appellate body in the WTO. There's now an interim system being put in place that includes, by the way, New Zealand and China and the European Union and a whole lot of others, but not the United States. Yeah, we do need trade rules to operate at the highest level, but sometimes things can be sorted out without quite going that far. It's not an easy thing to take a WTO action.
We had Kimberly Cruther on the show last week speaking
She's
around.
Great. She knows all about this.
She is, and that effectively pumping record farm subsidies in the US would be a non-tariff barrier, would it not?
Well, it's actually a subsidy action. It's not considered a non-tariff barrier in the strict sense of the word, because those subsidies don't directly impede our market access, but they do impact on our ability to do business in the United States and elsewhere, and they need to be addressed. One of the problems that the WTO has had is it's been unable to move forward on a very important set of negotiations around trade distorting agriculture support of that kind. And we really want to get that moving again. To do that, we have to have confidence in the WTO, more engagement from the United States, and a new Director General. All of those things remain to be done.
How are you feeling about a democratic leadership in the States? I'm sure that that's going to change things. But what does it mean for the CPTPP as well?
Yeah, well, I obviously I'm hopeful that the Biden presidency will result in more rational policy, rational trade policy on the part of the United States. I think it will. I think it will lead them to re-engage more constructively in the WTO. We know it needs fixing, but the way to fix it is not to explode it. I think it'll mean a more sane attitude in relation to China, hopefully. They still got a problem with China, a big problem. But I don't think they'll prosecute that policy in quite the same antagonistic way that has proved so difficult for the world. But on CPTPP, I'm not sure that they're going to find their way back anytime soon. It may be, though, that this RCEP gives them a real fright, and it should do, because other people are going and doing deals now that don't involve the United States. They've taken themselves out of the equation. They're not sitting at the table. And that could well focus the mind. But I think possibly an early return to CPTPP is not on the cards. Maybe in time they will get around to it. We hope they do.
Lastly, with the Boris nightmare unfolding, and he's meant to be Mr. Brexit, is that going to have an effect on progress for us?
Well, this is a very sorry state of affairs, isn't it? We can't progress our NZ-UK FTA to its conclusion, I don't think, without Brexit being sorted. We can make a lot of progress in the meantime, mind you. We've had 2 rounds of negotiations, seem to be going quite well. We can't, so I think that is a real problem to sorting out our post-Brexit trade arrangements. They've got to leave for us to know what that is going to look like. We still have some issues with the European Union and the UK, however, around these quotas that they are saying they're going to divide up. Particularly, this is going to be a problem for the sheep meat industry next year. And time is really running out on this. And, the new government, our new government, Jacinda Ardern and Damien O'Connor are just going to have to get on the phone and they're going to have to say this situation is intolerable if it proceeds. If it persists, it is not the way to start a new constructive relationship in trade through an FTA.
And Jacinda was quoted pre-election saying she will forefront a lot of these trade agreements, using her popularity for some good in terms of that, which is great.
Yeah, well, strength to her.
Yeah, Stephen, you may have heard, we're talking about, career pathways that you may have thought you were going to head on in your high school years. What were some of those outstanding subjects for you, and which direction did you think you were going to go when you were sort of 15, 16? I'm
a little boring because I wanted to be a diplomat when I was at high school, and I in fact became one. So I realised that dream. However, then I left. I left the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade and went on to do things in business, something I never thought that I would do. I mean, in some respects, I still do the same trade policy related things that have always been of interest to me, but I really wanted to be a diplomat at school, and pleased to say I was able to realise that dream.
Was there someone stand out that was a mentor back in the day on the telly or the radio that you thought, oh, I want his job or hers?
You know what, I remember sort of seeing a parade of distinguished people through the school I went to. Auckland Grammar had a lot of very high level people would come and talk to us. Now, occasionally they must be desperate. They get me to talk back to the school from time to time. But one or two of those had a big impact on me, who had been diplomats and had worked in international policy. And I had an interest in languages, so that's what really sparked my dream.
Oh, absolutely. I can totally understand that. Thank you so much, Stephen Jacobi there from the New Zealand International Business Forum. And of course, the new news is the signing of the Pan-Asia Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, known as RCEP. Yet another acronym just to top off your week.
This is Sarah's Country.